Like Ryan Howard in The Office, I never made a single sale. Today I'm going to be talking about when I worked for Aflac during the 2020 pandemic. So sit back with a warm bowl of soup and I'll tell you about my pitiful attempt at being a salesman. I graduated from college in the spring of 2020, so I was able to narrowly escape my final semester right as the pandemic hit. Everything was getting shut down and anyone who could was working remotely. As the summer came along, I decided to start looking for a job, and I'm ashamed to say I used Indeed when searching for openings. Indeed may work for some people now and again, but in my opinion, their listings are just quantity over quality. I would set up my filters to target positions that were aligned with my fields of study, click search, and then get shown an opening to work at Taco Bell. But amongst all the garbage, I found a listing for selling supplemental insurance with Aflac. Like most people, all I knew about Aflac was they had silly commercials, usually involving a duck hurting himself. It was the first promising position I found, and it was fully remote. So I applied and promptly got offered an interview. The interview itself was very pleasant, and the woman I talked to, let's call her Barbara, seemed very passionate about selling insurance. Not long after the fact, Barbara contacted me and offered the position. Now, I got the job very easily for two reasons. Number one, I'm an awesome guy, so, who wouldn't want to hire me? And B, compensation was solely from commission. So if I was going to make any money, I needed to lock in and learn how to sell supplemental insurance. Barbara assigned me a mentor who was also her husband. We'll call him Jim. Like Barbara, Jim was very nice to talk to, and he also seemed to love his job at Aflac. To get started, he basically recommended I job shadow some of the other agents to get a better idea of how the day-to-day operations went. And this is where the first red flag came up if you don't count the fact I only got paid from making sales. The agent I would remotely job shadow was named, let's call him Jackson. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say Jackson might be one of the most unfriendly people I've ever met in my life. I'm sure he's a decent guy in general, but man, someone must have peed in his Cheerios right before I logged on to the Zoom call. All I really did was listen to him make cold calls to various businesses. Most of them didn't even pick up, and I'm sure they were all itching to call back after hearing the ray of sunshine Jackson on their voicemail. But during this shadow, I tried to make small talk with him between calls, and he was having none of it. He usually gave me one-word answers to my questions, and I remember hearing an ESPN notification on his cell phone, like the da-na-na, na-na-na. So I asked him if he had gotten a score update or something. All he said to me was, "No, it's for a fantasy league." And that was it. I thought to be a good salesman, you had to be personable, but I guess Jackson had turned off that setting since I wasn't a potential client. It was a little discouraging to try and learn from someone who clearly didn't care about me, but I pushed forward to try and make some sales of my own. Jim had given me a long list of companies to call and try to set up meetings with. Unsurprisingly, I wasn't getting any bites from these businesses. Although when I called the local therapist's office, he actually seemed interested. So we chatted about when we could set up a time to meet, and I asked him if he wanted to talk online or in person. He then told me it's much better to do these kinds of appointments in person so we can have a better conversation without any technical roadblocks. And that's when my heart sank. The therapist thought I was calling to make an actual appointment with him to talk about my life and feelings. And after all the failure I was experiencing, perhaps I should have taken him up on that offer. Despite this job clearly not going how I wanted it to, I was in the process of studying for an exam that I needed to pass in order to get my insurance license. And you can probably guess how the exam went. I failed miserably. Not only that, but I had to drive over half an hour just to go take the test on a computer. I understand they do this to prevent cheating, but I don't think even my study guides could have saved me. There were maybe 5 questions I actually remembered answers to from going over the material. Otherwise, I was like a deer in headlights the rest of the time. When I was driving back home, I called Jim to let him know I failed the exam, but he seemed optimistic I would eventually pass and told me to just continue trying to set up meetings with businesses. But I think failing the exam was where I hit my breaking point. I was realizing through all of this Aflac crap that to be a good salesman, you had to be a persistent jerk. So points for Jackson, because I'm sure he's still doing a great job coercing companies into paying for insurance they don't need. But I just didn't want to be a jerk, and I certainly didn't want to be motivated to sell something only because it benefited me. And when I actually thought about giving up on becoming an insurance salesman, my whole demeanor improved and I felt like it was the right decision. So I emailed Barbara and Jim to let them know I would be quitting. I wasn't worried about how they would respond because they had both been so positive and understanding throughout my short time at Aflac. But I'll never know how they would have responded because they just never did. Absolute radio silence. I couldn't believe it. Even though Jackson was extremely unpleasant, at least he was being genuine. Barbara and Jim showed me their true colors by not responding to my resignation, and if anything, it made my decision to leave even more justified. The only person from Aflac who even acknowledged my departure was the HR lady because she needed to make sure they properly removed my employment from the company. I left Aflac without making a single cent, but I kept my head held high and my dignity intact. But anyways, that's all I really have to say about that. I still can't see an Aflac commercial to this day without being reminded of what a horrible experience it was to work for them. But I will say this was just my experience, and clearly the job wasn't right for me, so I'm not trying to talk smack about them or anything. Let me know in the comments if you have any interesting sales experiences, and if you like strawberry shortcake, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.